The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Let me move over here.
Is it recording? Good. Okay. Is that on? Okay, great. Thank you. I'll be right back. Let me email this. It's just everything I wrote down yesterday from everything we talked about. It's pretty long. Okay, that should have sent. Did that come through?
Not yet.
Oh, okay. It's a little slow in here sometimes. I'm not sure why. Did it still want to come through?
Nothing.
Oh, that's so weird here.
Oh, you know why? Because I'm probably not online.
Okay.
No, it just came in.
Did it come? Okay, great.
No, not that. Something else came in,
Oh.
which means I'm online. It did pick up the internet, and not your no. Do you have which number do you have? Maybe you're doing it to the wrong email.
That's so weird because I got an email that. That's odd.
My email address is, here, I'll write it down.
So I sent it to the one that I had, yesterday, it's from something that you sent to me. It was, marchest@ohio.edu.
Yeah, see if it came on the phone,
Yeah, 'cause I don't know why, I got an email that
not the computer.
I got an email that the link was clicked, which is odd
No,
because
it
you
didn't.
didn't get it. So that doesn't make any sense.
It also didn't come on the phone, so
Huh.
usually it comes on that quick.
Let me try again. I don't know why it wouldn't be working. Either way, I'll just come over and
Okay.
show it to you. But that was actually very but so yeah, getting to the actual book, we had Establishing Principles was chapter 1, and then, but yeah, I'm just trying to go back through what we talked about. So that was the example you gave in your speech about your son, which I think could be good because if the intro is about competition.
Yeah, but he doesn't fit into the breakthrough
Yeah.
goals anymore.
Yeah.
So I'm just not sure he makes it into the book area,
Okay.
unless I may figure out a way, we may figure out a way that, competitive people, if I do, it's going to be just the way I do it in the book. I'm going
Right.
to say, one of the most competitive person my guess is you're competitive as well.
Right. Exactly.
It'd be the same thing. I guess that's okay. The only bad thing about that is if someone has seen your presentation, then they're going back and this is just exactly like the presentation.
Yeah,
which
but
I don't know if
you
that's
use
bad
I feel
anyway.
like I don't think that's bad because
So I
I
think
think you use
that's
a lot
how
of the same stories because you
But
have a
I'm
lot
but
of
I'm
good
adding more
stories.
stuff to it.
Exactly.
So I think I would what I would do is add one of the most competitive people I've ever met is my son.
Right.
But I'm betting you are just as competitive.
Mhm.
And as a competitive person, you want to also make a huge
Right.
impact, right?
Right. Which maybe
So.
that fits into the intro. That's possible.
Right.
Maybe that could be a story that you use near the beginning.
Because really, it's about making an impact. How do we make a maximum amount of impact?
Right.
And achieve great results.
Right. So then we went through why you need to establish breakthrough goals, and then about how the action steps are directly. And I like that. I think you should definitely include the high jumper metaphor because I think that was definitely that'll definitely get across to people. It's just a much more it's like a relatable type of metaphor, definitely. Especially the brain answers the questions it's asked. I said that yesterday, and I liked it a lot. I think that should definitely be in there. So then we went into the ways. So the inspirational word picture goal talked about appealing to the head and the heart. Use the example of JFK, Steve Jobs, which I think is good. That could be a good starting point because those things that everybody knows, the things that people can relate to, definitely. But then, yeah, we got into this story about how, and I think that's good because for every point, you pretty much had a story, which I liked a lot because that is going to be what people remember. And rather than just saying this is what I did at this company, this was my position,
right.
You have these stories that show people rather
right.
than just telling them. And you said you did end up getting so close to one of your customers that you were the best man.
Right.
We'll add that. I don't know why I didn't write that down. Yeah, that's definitely a good one to include.
If I was best man, I'm thinking it through now. Was I best man? I think I was in the wedding party.
Either way, we'll add that.
They're not going to know that. He's not going to know that. I don't even remember his name. I tried to find him, and I can't on LinkedIn,
But definitely we'll include that because that's a good story. That's just a good example.
I remember he was an old hippie. He and his wife used to just sit there and smoke marijuana constantly, at the beach house.
That's hilarious. So yeah, we'll definitely put that in. Good. That's a good way that you sort of took this idea
Right, and followed it.
and really followed it and related that back to your boss's advice,
Right.
made that more personal. Number 2 was redefining the playing field, which, do you want to use the specific example of like because I know you said like, would you rather play at Athens High School or Ohio State Stadium? Like, would
Yeah,
I-
the local high school. Would
Like
you
the
like,
local high
since,
school,
since
yeah.
they don't know where that is,
Mhm.
would you rather play at,
Yeah,
the
like the
local
local
high
high
school
school.
or and I guess I use Ohio State because it's usually from Columbus, so, or, maybe in that case you say, or at Penn State, where
Right,
I went to
at
school,
any.
at Beaver Stadium, where
Mhm.
I have season tickets, where 110,000 people pass the stadium every
Right.
year,
Right, we can put in.
Screw those Ohio State people.
I agree. We can put
I
in
hate
those
them,
numbers.
I really do.
Oh,
You
God,
can
don't we
imagine
all?
just growing up, like, in Columbus with my kids and everything,
Oh yeah, I'm sure, because it's just everything there, right?
Oh, that's all
just
they
the
live
team,
for.
right?
They're
Yeah.
obnoxious people.
Because they don't have they don't have an NFL
They don't have a
team,
pro
right?
team, and
Yeah.
they're just so obnoxious. Like, we're the best, and we should always beat everyone, and,
Do you hear they're trying to patent like
the. Yeah.
That's not going to work. That doesn't make sense. And I like the transition, or I like the idea of just the example of Crest. I thought that was a good example, but if we want to make it more personal, that you followed that with the Elmer's example of transitioning from which is definitely included. That was a great example of that, of you transitioning from just glue to arts and crafts in general. That should definitely be in there. And we're gonna there are a couple places where we need like dates and statistics and things like that. So I think that was one of them. We just needed to know, which I'm sure is public record. We can find when they were bought, when they were sold, when they transitioned and started selling more just arts and crafts products in general. I'm sure that can be figured out, but we might need dates for that. So we'll put that in. So, and then you have the Papa Murphy story about, it is a 5th largest company in the U.S., right?
Right.
Pizza company.
Pizza company, right.
What were, I know you listed them yesterday. It was Domino's, Pizza Hut,
Papa John's,
Papa John's.
Little Caesars.
Okay. Perfect. I thought that would be good to include. Those are big names. So yeah, that's another perfect example, and that's like, I think we have 4 examples right there of redefining the playing field. So if we want to use all of those, I think there's room for them. But if we want to leave it as personal examples, like things that you have expertise in, we could just expand on Elmer's and Papa Murphy's.
Mm-hmm.
Because those are ones that you worked on, so those are probably better stories for this purpose. Yeah, and then about how Papa Murphy's changed from just pizza to expanding. Did you want to put in here at all how when you left they stopped doing that and it kind of failed, or did you feel like that wasn't right?
No, I don't want to say that.
Okay.
That'll come across as arrogant.
Right,
Do you
yeah.
know what I mean?
Yeah. So I'm sure there's a way to word that where it would sound
Right.
like a lesson, but I could see
Mhm.
where that wouldn't necessarily be important or could come across the wrong way. All right. So, do you want to include the examples of, just really quickly as like an intro to that idea? Did you want to include the ones that like Crest and Popeyes that are just outside examples, or were those just like
No, those are
talking
good
points?
examples.
Those are good
I think,
examples you want to put in there? Okay,
absolutely.
because we can sort of
Yeah, they're good examples.
introduce the idea
Right.
with those and then expand with Elmer's and expand with Papa Murphy's
Mhm.
and ones that
Mhm.
you worked on and that
Mhm.
you can say more about. So I'm gonna move this up to here. And we'll say that we're gonna So moving on to the third idea, we're starting the clouds come down from there. So we had the story about Bob Evans, which is good because we haven't talked about Bob Evans yet. So that's good to put in there. But you said how your idea originally was, you said, why don't we move it, from 7 to aim for 80? And you eventually came down to 20.
Right.
But it was that idea of starting really high. And it led to major action steps, which is good because that was this chapter, the first idea. And I think that's definitely a good example. We did need probably statistics for that, just years. Do you remember what year that was that they started remodeling?
Oh, the remodeling started in 2009.
Okay.
2010. That's when we got approved.
Okay, so we can look that up to make sure. But yeah, that's definitely a good story because again, that's something people remember. I remember, when they started changing it from that general store idea. I asked my mom about that yesterday. I came home like, remember how they used to look with the general store? And she's like, oh yeah, that was kind of weird. But so then you went from Bob Evans to Papa Murphy's, right?
Yes.
Okay, so then you took that lesson and added those new goals.
Right.
And then we included the woman from, I think, store 111 with the cookie sales.
Right.
So if we can find more information about that, I think that would be a good story too.
Yeah, it's more of a general example.
Exactly, yeah.
Do you know what I mean? I don't know that you getting into what she did and everything. That's
right.
The idea is finding what the top can be and then motivating people.
Right.
If someone else can do this, then we can't.
Exactly.
Do you follow me?
Yes, and you said that you took employees to the different locations, right? And then saw those. Okay, because I think that's important to include that you were observing and learning from the people that were doing it the best. Yeah, we don't necessarily have to say she was marketing them this way and that's how they increased their cookie sales in Kentucky. We could say this is what.
Because it's not a marketing story or anything. It's really just about the fact that this is a way to motivate someone is to say, look, if someone else is doing this, then we can do as well,
Right, and rather than just being comfortable saying this branch is doing a good job with cookie sales, great. You were taking people to see what they were doing, and observe from that, and try to do better in other stores and take those lessons. I think that this section also seems to be sort of about taking lessons and putting them, transferring to new places. You took that lesson from Bob Evans and transferred it to Papa Murphy's about innovating and making things like a branding opportunity. So I think that's definitely good to include that. And focus that more on the idea of you were observing and you were learning from what certain branches were doing correctly. So that would be, as far as I have now, that would be chapter 1.
Okay.
Are you comfortable with that, with the amount that's in there?
Yeah.
Okay. So chapter 2 is knowledge. And that's a really good transition because that's sort of talking about that idea of you were seeking knowledge from this one store.
So the idea on that is that we you basically start with look we as a general there's more we probably have something about that there is more knowledge out there than at any time in history. Access to knowledge is greater than at any time in history. There's probably some facts you can put in
we can
about the access to information and to knowledge. However, most of the knowledge that's out there, or most of the people who are accessing knowledge now turn to the internet to gain that knowledge. And I don't blame them. There's just so much out there. And it is important, it's useful. However, there's an entire, I think, generations are growing up without accessing the experiential knowledge that's in people's heads. People now, I've seen it where people you know, you sit across the hall from someone, but you know, you don't necessarily go and talk to them about the business.
Right.
You know.
Mhm.
So that's what I when I'm in my presentation, I push people, look, get out of your office, never have lunch alone.
Mhm.
Go meet people, talk to them. You know, you'll never be able to find out all the things that are there that are just, they're not published, but the people know this. They have that background.
Mm-hmm. That's definitely a valuable point to put in there, that, like, yeah, as much information's out there, even more can be found through personal connection. It's something that you're not necessarily going to be able to Google.
Right.
So that's, yeah, we can start
so
with that.
So when people walk away, what do I really want them? I want them to walk away and think, you know, oh man, you know what? I think the guy was right. I need to talk more with people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm approaching this problem. Yeah, I got a lot of information, but who else can I talk to in the company?
Yeah, and that
so
plays into the idea of the whole book, where it's just going to
I actually do
improve
this. Make me think. So when I do this as a workshop, like I do a little exercise where I have them. They do a thing. In fact, they do how would you do a fundraiser for cancer, children's cancer? You know, like Penn State does that thing.
Yeah.
Fun. So I started. They don't know anything about that, and then they have to go through. Well, what would we do? First, I have them do breakthrough goals, and they make these huge goals. Like, well, let's cure cancer in the whole world, or let's fight different types of cancer. You know, because they're trying to expand the playing field. And I teach them how to do that. But then I do go through a thing now. How do you seek knowledge? Well, who might you? Let's go on the internet first. And they find stuff on the internet. Now that's good, but who are we going to talk to? Yeah. And then I force them to sit down and say, well, let's talk to we found out about this fawn thing. Let's talk to the director of the fawn. And say, yes, that's where I'm going. Yeah. That's what I want to do. Right. You know? And like talk to families who have kids with cancer. Yeah, exactly. Like those are just personal sort of like expertise that you're not going to find just by looking it up. Yeah, that just is a possible example. Do you want to, so we have a lot of the stories about the companies you've worked for and that part of your career. Do you want to put into these early chapters about anything about your teaching? I see what you're saying. I'm not really talking a lot about teaching. Yeah, I just realized that, and that's a good example to use, like at least that project. Let me write that down. I got to think about how do I put some examples more current in there about teaching and stuff. So you do want to do that? I think that's a good idea. I haven't thought about that yet. You know, how do I do it? What do I do? It's different. I'm not really, I don't have anything that I could point to where here's, like in the last 5 years, I've achieved great results. But I can use examples about I work with younger people and I noticed this and what if, you know? Right. So let me think about that. Certainly, when I get to teaching, because that also establishes me as somewhat of an expert on millennials because I deal with them all the time. Yeah. You know? Definitely. Like, you know the whole thing about advancements and what they're asking for. To your point, so in that section, at least we should say something. Look, I teach. How many do I teach? I said I teach 6, 7. You figure I teach 7 classes times at least 15. You know, I teach hundreds. I guess it's fair to say. Hundreds of students who are millennials and professionals every year. Hundreds and hundreds who are millennials every year. And I've seen firsthand that they are incredible at accessing information. Right. You know, through the internet. In fact, they are far better than I could ever do. You know, but I do believe a skill that's missing is this ability to connect with other people and to get information firsthand. You know. In fact, some are incredibly uncomfortable with using the telephone.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
Just, somewhat understandable now.
Right,
and
we
that-
kind of
and that-
haven't
and
had
that the
to,
main
right.
mode of communication nowadays is texting.
I think that project even is a really good example to start out with for this. And we're only on chapter 2, so we're introducing like a teaching example pretty early on.
Mhm.
So that's good because we can keep incorporating that at different points if we find something. But yeah, I think that project is a really good example of the whole seeking knowledge idea. So then we had, so this was like the carry out, so we have seeking experiential knowledge. This is kind of the same thing. We touched on like Google and like how you can only find so much through the internet, so we just talked about. And this is the same story about how you visited the top 10 Bob Evans carry-out locations.
Mhm.
And the woman in Louisville taught employees about carry-out personal experience. But that wasn't the same story as the cookie sales, because this is about carry-out.
The Bob Evans carry out?
Yeah.
No, that's
Okay, so it's a different story. Okay,
Yeah.
good. So we can include both of those. Those are different. And we'll say those are different. We'll frame those in a different way, so we can include them both. Then we had seek knowledge inside and outside of industry. So then you gave the example when you were changing from just glue at Elmer's to more arts and crafts, and you wanted to go into paint. You visited Sherwin-Williams for expertise.
Right.
And that does play into this chapter. I think will come together really nicely because it's just kind of all about sharing. I mean, it is seeking knowledge, but it is all about just sharing ideas. Because you said it that like you'll be surprised to see who's willing to sit with you and talk to you. Which does just play back into that same idea, which is a good example. Okay, so number 3 we should probably elaborate on a little bit because you said seek knowledge holders, not just position holders.
Yeah, it's not always the people who are. So the idea there is sometimes the people who know the knowledge don't have the big fancy title.
Mm-hmm.
They might not be the vice president or the CEO or whatever it is. Right?
Mm-hmm.
It could be someone who could be a lower level in the company but has a really strong expertise in a certain area
Mm-hmm.
that you're trying to work on.
Do you have any examples
The
of that?
example of that would be when we did the carry-out tour, and
Mm-hmm.
we learned so much from a carry-out attendant.
Right.
In Louisville, who had a load of ideas and also told us about problems that they had at the carry-out that we really needed to work towards solving if we wanted to do better.
Okay, so we could put that in there. And I think we included that example under the first point, but we can just call back to that now and just say, like, we can just talk about that in a different way and say that those people weren't necessarily the ones with, high positions or they didn't have a title, but they were the ones that knew what they were doing and they were the ones that share that knowledge. So that's a good, we can just call back to that. And number 4, I wanted to expand on a little bit too, just because I only had number and not any points about it, but encourage everyone to actively share knowledge.
Right.
Which is, I mean,
Yeah, I don't
kind of
say
speaks
much
for
about it,
itself,
right.
but
Right.
And that's sort of what we've been seeing. That could be another place to tie in teaching. Because you can, that's the expertise of millennials. You're encouraging everyone to share knowledge, and that's a way to do it, is to show the difference between how, they're very good at finding information.
But we need to
online,
probably
but,
form, since they don't naturally,
Mhm.
go out and, I guess, and probably I haven't really talked about that, but probably companies need to create more. They are, I think, creating a lot of social type things,
Mhm.
kickball and whatever the heck else
Mhm.
at the work situations. I don't know if that's a real problem or not.
Right, we'll put that in as a maybe.
Okay.
So the fifth was learning from observation. We had that very good example there we had two really good examples there. We had one about Soup to Go and how you came up with that whole idea from observation, from talking about it.
Right.
And then we had the example of Crayola, where when you came, you went to the, I forget what department that was, but you asked what failed. And they had the whole colored glue story. So those are both really good examples. So we'll have a lot to say under observation, and that'll have to really nicely, I think. So that just ties in a lot, and that's such a good, that's such a recognizable example for people, is that colored glue thing. I think that'll end really strongly because
It's a really cool story, and I can really, once you get something down, I'll expand on it until you put even more in it,
Yeah, and it's those, like we said yesterday, you said that's what it was.
Like everybody like you does remember the
exactly.
playing
So that'll
with the paint pens and stuff.
Yeah, so that'll end it really strongly because that's like a great story and it's brand recognition. People will know exactly what you're talking about. So that was chapter 2. Are you happy with ending it there with that story?
Good.
Okay.
That's good. It's actually a fairly long story, so but there's probably going to wind up being stuff you're going to have to cut out.
Yeah, there may
which
be.
is a better place to be, I think, right now.
Definitely, which is good because we didn't have quite as much to say about number 4. We had the example of the Bob Evans carry-out locations. We had the example of Sherwin-Williams. But yeah, that chapter wasn't necessarily, I don't think, terribly long, so that'll be good to end it there. And I think that sums up really nicely with the whole observation idea of sharing. I think that sums up the sharing knowledge idea really well. So that was chapter 2. So chapter 3, think differently. So we kind of start chapter 3 with the idea of creative thinking being met with resistance sometimes, because that's when you brought up the story of the Hershey Kisses packaging.
Right.
I think I like starting it that way, because you say the whole thing about the Albert Einstein quote, and then we did the Apple commercial with the idea of being a troublemaker and a risk taker.
I do like that. I think starting that thing with I think differently.
Right.
I've always been someone who's thought differently, but thinking differently is often met with resistance.
Right.
Let me give you, sometimes even the even ideas that are and maybe you say, even ideas that now are no-brainers to people are generally met with resistance early on.
Right.
Let me give you an example, and then talk about what happened then. And then I will soften that to not make it sound like I'm a genius or something, or you know what I mean. But,
no, but I think that sounds good, because I think that a lot of times when you read those Albert Einstein quotes and when you see those like inspirational Apple commercials, they're great, but they do seem just like so inspirational. Like, if you think differently, you'll succeed no matter what. And I think it's good to kind of bring that back and be like, you might be met with resistance sometimes. You might not.
You're going to have a lot of people resisting.
Yeah, it makes that very real. It's not
no one wants to be the person who failed to achieve a goal. So And I'll probably insert something in there about them being, because I usually get a question on that.
Mhm.
When I'm teaching this in a keynote, I don't get questions,
Right.
but I do get questions when I'm doing an ethics workshop, and they'll usually say, yeah, but I'm worried. I mean, I understand what you're saying, but are you saying we should set these goals so high and then what nobody achieves them and everybody's frustrated?
Mhm.
You know, it's like, no, that's not what I'm saying. Is we have I hear, you know, I completely understand it, and I would never to tell anyone, because I wanted to make my bonus,
Mhm.
is make my bonus based on achieving a 25% growth rate.
Right.
You know,
Mhm.
that's definitely not where I'm going. So what you're talking about, there's a difference between the objective for a payout of a bonus
Mhm.
versus a stretch objective
Right.
that you have that let's to force yourself to think and take different action steps. You know, you have some type of stretch goals that maybe aren't the ones that your everyday living bonus stands for. You know, that's where it's a stretch bonus, and it's like, okay, look, we're going to have a stretch plan, and if we achieve this plan, you know, your $160,000 salary goes to $250.
Yeah.
You know, or whatever that's. You know.
Yeah, and I just think that's a strong way to start it, because
what company that I had that did that. I think that was Ralph who used to do that. Nestle brand.
Because you do go on to, and you have other stories here about how thinking differently has succeeded for you in the past. So I think it is strong to start out with where it didn't necessarily, but then we can move on to, okay, it didn't this one time, but here are 3 times that it did.
Right.
So then we had the story about your kids at the art museum, which I loved.
Right.
I think you should put that in.
Yeah, that's a fun
I think that's
Everybody
a good
likes
one.
that.
I'm trying to think. I wonder if we should open with that. Because
I kind of like the resistance.
I do too, but I'm thinking it sort of takes it directly into a business sense and then back to a more personal thing.
So you're
and then
saying
back
start with, let me tell you, you know, who's the most different thinker I've ever met.
Right.
It's my son, Brett.
Yeah, and I think that's really good because the chapter
you did that,
you
finish that with basically that story with, now, not everyone was born with a mind like my son, Brett.
Right.
But that's okay. And you still, but then you're getting into the tools. But when are you getting into the resistance? Is the problem then?
I think you bring up that story. I think you start with that because that just introduces in kind of like a personal, like fun way the idea of thinking differently. And when it relates to, I feel like when it relates to little kids, it brings people back to.
But see, the way that works is here. Let me just switch the board here. So you've got the Brett story leads to creative mind, right? But not everyone born with this mindset. So here are some tools. And then we have the tools.
Okay.
See that's how that flows. So
see, I think it would fit in there.
So I don't know where the resistance then comes. You know, that's why I think the resistance has to come first. So I think it's look, because it's about thinking differently, right?
Yeah.
So thinking differently is important, but not easy. One of the reasons is not easy is that
right, it can be met with resistance.
It can be met, right? It can be met. Is often met with resistance. Let me give you an example.
Right.
I think that's the start.
Okay.
Do you follow me? Because then it transitions to now one of the most different thinkers and most creative thinkers that I know and is my son, Brett.
Right.
You know, let me tell you a story about Brett. And then we tell the story and everything, right? We tell a couple of those funny stories about, and then we say, but you know what? Not everyone is born with this kind of creative mindset.
Right.
So here are some tools for you to use, and then we go through the tools. You get it?
Yeah, definitely.
I think that would work.
Okay. Because I was thinking we could insert, rather than saying like, not everybody's born with this mindset, we could take that and put it into there and like tell the story about your son, and then say, it's not always met with, because you said, you know, he won that little contest at the art museum because he saw outside the box, but then we can say like, it won't always be met with that level. Like,
and that, I think that would work if I had examples on how to beat the resistance,
right?
But I don't. People ask me that a lot, and they say, well, what do you do? And I say, well, you try to be persistent, you try to make it their idea,
right.
You know?
But I think that a good way, we have a couple examples in here of ways that it has worked. We have the story about Crayola paint products. We have the story about the promotion from Subway and changing that to the Steak Up Your Pizza promotion. I think that rather than keeping it within the same example of saying, this is how you beat this resistance, saying sometimes it'll be met with resistance, that's just how it is. Sometimes it won't, it'll succeed.
And I probably need to add some stuff in there about how to fight through the resistance.
Right.
So, that I don't in my speech.
We'll add that as something to think. But I do think those stories would make for sort of way, in a way, they're a way to fight against the resistance, because like sometimes the resistance is there, but then you keep going and you'll succeed. You know, and sometimes the resistance is just the reality, and sometimes you can't do anything about it, but then there are going to be other ways that you succeed. So we can play around with the order of that and add that. And I can always write both, you know, both orders of things and see which one you end up liking better. That story. We had that example, and I don't know, did you want to put exercises throughout the book, or did you want to put them at the end? Because you had that
if it's
example.
Appropriate, we could put it there. Yeah.
You had that example of, which could be another strong way of opening the chapter, actually, is the example of which number is least like the others.
Yeah.
Because if that was, I mean, that was in there, that's a very strong example. Which could be honestly
The only
a way
thing,
of
that one
starting.
I'm worried about. There's a couple things I'm worried about that like are in this other book.
They're from other
people. It's a really remote book. So I might come up with a different one than that.
Right.
You know, no one's ever going to call me on a speech, but I don't think anyone would ever read this book to call me on it. But
no, people will definitely read it.
I know I got that from a book.
Okay.
You know.
We can try to find, because if we try to find the source of it, and if we have it and we can say it's from this,
right,
that could definitely get around that. But yeah, I'll put in a note.
There's probably 100 other examples like that.
I'm sure they're all over the place. I'm sure they're not specific to one thing, but yeah, we'll look for like the source from that, figure that one out. I think that's a really strong example to include. So then, yeah, we have the Crayola paint products. We have the Papa promotion. I almost feel like the Papa Murphy's promotion idea with the like, what's our avocado, and like changing it to the steak up your pizza, spice up your pizza promotion. I almost feel like that works better from from example or learning from observation section, unless we can find a way to change kind of what we're talking about and see that more in a way that makes it more about thinking outside the box. How would you make that story about?
So tell me again.
So there was that story about you going to Subway and they had the avocado.
Yeah.
And then you sort of brought that idea in.
That's about the transferring.
Yeah. So that yeah, and so I have that under this section for some reason. I think just because like chronologically that's how we talked about it.
Yeah,
but I feel like
the
that
idea
learned,
of transferring an idea from one place to yours.
I'm gonna move that
That's where it
up to
belongs,
that section. I'll put that under the observation too. And so then we went into use the collision method, and we talked about races and putting things together in a strategic way that you wouldn't think to put together, knowing how to create collisions, and then we went through that whole category, features, brand usage, that chart with the Elmer's products.
Right.
That's
the collision method.
Right.
That I teach. That's going to be, those will be bigger. So when you get down to it, you may break them into chapters because they may be bigger, you know. But that's good because it's actually a real useful, tangible idea, and it's something proprietary that I have developed. A lot of the other stuff is just common sense stuff. That's a proprietary tool that I've developed, you know.
So I'll make sure, we'll make sure to mention that that's your own personal idea, your own personal philosophy. Do you want to include that example from the Elmer's products with the chart, the kind of chart idea of making things? Yeah, because I like that a lot.
Yeah, I think that's a good one, and you know, let me give you an example of how to use this. You know, the truth is, I didn't set up a grid like that and come up with those ideas. I actually, you know what I did? At one point I sat and I said, well, my brain is naturally like a freaking, makes like a ping pong ball, goes from place to place. And I literally was trying to well, how does it work? What am I doing? Well, I knew this and I knew that, and so that's how I kind of came up with
connecting things.
That's how I came up with this idea of how do we, you know, how can a person actually do this if your mind is not naturally ADHD ping pong ball, you know? But
that chart was a very it was like a tangible thing.
Right.
Breaking it up into categories and saying, well, we can take this, 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 and this, and make a product from these ideas fit this criteria. I think so I'll definitely put that in. So that was all chapter 3. But do you like closing it that way? Because it's
closing with what?
It would be, as it is now, it would be closing it with, it would close with the idea of the collision method, but it would be, I have the Elmer's chart idea as example of the last thing in there.
Right.
Do you like closing that way? Or, obviously you can add a little conclusion at the end.
Yeah, I think a little, they'll all have to have a kind of a wrap up. So, you know, the key here is don't fret if you're not a natural thinker like Brett, creative thinker like Brett. That's okay.
We'll wrap up with a callback.
You have resources. You know what you may even do is, here's some other places to turn to a book for inspiration. And maybe you list design thinking and these other books and things that other people have written about with exercise on creative thinking.
Yeah, well, definitely. I like wrapping up with a callback to the story about your son.
Or the other place to wrap up is if you're not, there are books and exercises, but also go out and surround yourself and go out and hire, because I get into that later. But go out and hire some or expand your network to include creative people. You'd be surprised, but that person at work who you think is maybe a little bit scatterbrained and doesn't do as well and doesn't get his expenses accounts done on time and everything else, and you might think he's a slacker. You know,
mine just might work
that person might be the person that you need to tap into
Mhm.
to help you think outside the box and come up with some of the big ideas, you know?
Mhm. I like the idea of including other books and other places to go with that, but I think we should do that at the very end of the book,
Okay,
like any other
okay.
sources or
Other
anything else
sources,
you
right.
found things. I think that that's a
Gotcha.
good way to end
Okay,
all of it.
okay,
Even if, probably past the conclusion, even just its own little thing. Because I like it, I'm just not sure in here. I feel like it might just seem kind of misplaced. Even though it does relate to that content a lot, I feel like it would just be sort of choppy from chapter to chapter, but I like the idea of putting it at the end, so I'll put that in. So that would be how we would end chapter 3. Sounds good. So chapter 4, tools of total commitment. So this is going to be a long one, probably, because that was, I have 9 steps. It was 10, right?
oh, I don't even know, that was
Okay.
written like 4 or 5 years ago,
Okay.
I might have had 10, you know?
Okay.
And I keep simplifying it. So.
Okay, because I thought
So we
like I
could
only had
just
9
change it
steps.
to whatever it is, or,
Okay.
you know, or just,
Because right now it's just tools of total commitment. I have a number, but I have the
Right.
method, so I just wanted to make sure I got
Right.
everything.
right,
So number 1 was total commitment will generate the right method. I said, you said that maybe from another source, so we wanted to look that up and make sure.
yeah, I don't know if I need to
So we
talk about
have
that
the-
differently or not, because that was,
Can always reword it.
you know, I got it from this other, book and presentation that the guy did. Now, he called it intentionality, so I changed it to total commitment.
Okay.
You know, so
Mhm.
that's one thing I did.
Right. Okay. So
You
we
know,
were reworded a little bit.
But I'm pretty sure he was total commitment generates the right method. Does he own that? I don't know that he owns that.
And we can,
you know what
I mean, it's sort of,
you know,
it's one of those things that if we reword it and
Right.
expand on it in a different way,
Right.
it's not
Right.
going to be, he's not going to come after you or anything, so that's fine.
So yeah, it could be that you talk about if you're totally committed to something, you will, you continue to work till you find a solution. Do you follow me?
Right.
You find a way to, you find a solution.
Right. And do you think that would that includes a sort of trial and error process too?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you have any stories about that or wanted to say anything about
Well,
that?
no, the big story about that, and the great one, is about my son Ryan, where I tried all these different methods
Right.
until I finally hit one, the Young Life program, that worked.
And he's okay with you including that?
Oh, he's going to have to be.
Okay.
It's not like this is going to be a national bestseller, and
You never.
yeah, you never know, right? So who knows? The rest of me. Sorry.
Okay. No. Okay, so we were on, so that was the end of the total commitment generating the right method, which we
Okay.
can possibly reword, but that was, okay, so there was the story about your son Ryan, which is good, because that'll sum that up really nicely. The second point was stay committed until you achieve your goal, which is a good transition from that. But then that's when you say, so most companies will fail not from the wrong people or skill level, but from lack of commitment. And that's when you brought up, which I like and I think we can really expand on, is what would you do and how would you act if trying wasn't an option?
Right. Here's
And-
a situation in my life, and I tell us, right?
Mhm.
You know,
Which story were you going to use for that?
that's
Because-
Ryan and my
Oh, that
son
was it?
Ryan,
Okay,
yeah,
okay.
getting
So
into
we
trouble
can-
and
Okay, so we can kind of keep those separate, but we can figure out if we want to put that story under number 1 or number 2.
Okay.
Because originally the story that you had under that was about Papa Murphy's failing after you left because they didn't continue. They didn't have a commitment to that idea, but we don't want to include that. So, okay, we might put the story about Ryan here. We'll figure out where we want to put that. Number 3 was the idea of failing over and over, which is great because you had the Michael Jordan example and the Brett Favre example, which I'm sure honestly we could put in there just briefly because of the things that people know and are familiar with.
right.
But then you have a ton of good examples for that, like the Baby Ruth
And I
ice cream
think
bars.
with the Michael Jordan, you say, look, there was a famous Nike commercial that featured Michael Jordan, where Michael Jordan talks about the fact that he took the game-winning shot 26 times
Right.
and failed. You know, and it is, and he goes on to state that it's because he failed is
Right.
why he succeeded.
Why he succeeded.
You know,
Mhm.
it's, and the truth is that's no one remembers him
Mhm.
for that, So, there's a lot of it. I've heard that over the years in so many different speeches, the examples of,
Yeah, you do.
the baseball players who fail
Yeah.
because they only hit the ball 3 out of 10 times,
Mhm.
and it's like,
Right.
but you've got to be, or the business owner who failed over and over again. You
Right.
know, no matter how many times you hear it, it's still
It's effective.
it's effective
Mhm.
for people to yeah, you're right. It is okay that I failed,
Mhm.
isn't it? It's okay.
Yeah, and I think
Right.
that opening
They
anyone
still
of,
listen to you, and they're still motivated by
yeah,
it.
and I
you
think
know?
opening any one of these sections with either a personal story that people can relate to, or that establishes you, or just something like this that people know about and are familiar with, and then
Right.
get into the more business side of it. I think that's a good way to open all of these sections. And it looks like that's kind of what we've been doing, rather than get directly into like the methodology of it. I think that's a good sort of ease into it. We had something written about Dave Thomas, but we didn't expand on that.
No, we were talking about failures and
Mhm.
people who have failed. I don't even know if he did fail now. I just said I'd have to go back and look at his
Uh-huh.
book. And he started what was his first business? It was a hamburger place, but it was more of a casual restaurant. But I think he actually succeeded. He was one of the rarities
Mm-hmm.
who didn't fail.
So, and I think that you have better examples because you had all these other things, which we can, again, get more into if you want to expand on, like, one of those, because I have Baby Ruth ice cream bars, Dream Designer, Papa Murphy's pan pizzas, and Elmer's glop written down.
Yeah.
So if there's any one of those in particular that you want to expand on.
I don't know where that fits.
I just think it's a personal
Or a
personal
personal
example of failure, yeah.
Well, or maybe as a personal note to that, I say, look, do you remember any of these products? And then I list a bunch of them,
Mm-hmm.
and I say probably not,
Probably
because
not,
those
yeah.
were many of I like that. And
Yeah.
I say probably not, because those are just a list of some of the products that I
Right.
tried to launch
Right.
that failed. You know?
Right, exactly. I think that's perfect. And I was thinking if you want to expand on one.
But then turn it around. But the truth is, those failures will not define me.
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah.
ultimately I'll be defined by things that worked and
Right.
and were successful.
So we're successful.
You know, same is true for you and your company.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and don't worry about the things that
Mhm.
aren't going to work. I like that.
Yeah, I like that.
So that's the way to do it.
And I think that because we have the Michael Jordan example and we have sort of, we can discuss that and discuss like the general idea of it. But I think if you want to expand on one of those things and talk a little bit more about why it failed and what happened, and then list the other things afterwards.
So which one?
Any one of those that you
Yeah,
want.
I don't think it's a story about why it failed.
Okay.
I think the story is about it's okay to fail.
Mm-hmm.
Do you follow me?
Right, yeah.
So I really think that's shorter. It's more about, look, these are a list of my failure, of some failed products.
Okay.
That's okay because
Mhm.
they don't define me.
Okay.
Do you follow me?
Yeah, definitely.
Not why, because if you're like, well, this one failed, because that's almost like you're making an excuse.
Yeah.
It's more about it's okay to fail. You know?
Right, like I failed.
Yeah, it's not like,
This.
well, why did Michael Jordan miss the 26
Mhm.
shots? What did he do wrong?
Right.
That's not the story. It's that it's
that it
okay
happened.
that
Right.
it happened and that he's still successful.
Mhm.
That didn't define him. So that's the same with me. It's like, that doesn't define me,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Okay, yeah, that sounds good.
and it won't define you.
So then we move on to point 4, which is everyone can lead something. And you had that story about coaching the 3rd grade basketball team.
Yes.
And
And then also the story about hiring 3 people at Bob Evans, undergraduates who did just, who led in different areas of the company and did a spectacular job. And what is it that you might lead? And can you get everyone if you're a manager, get everyone to lead, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you're a lower level worker, entry level, that's okay. What can you lead? Find something that you can lead.
Was that at Bob Evans or was that at Wendy's?
That was at Bob Evans.
Okay. So number 5, I have listed, but then we didn't have any like sub points for that. It was just no excuses, keep moving forward. Did you have any stories or anything else you want to expand on?
Keeping moving. No, that's all about. That was the story about TJ and the kicking.
Oh, you're right.
Right.
Which is good because if we already included that story about TJ with the basketball team, and that's a good.
So it builds. And then I also tell no excuses. We tend to make excuses for yourself. That's where I tell the story about myself.
Mm-hmm.
And that, in my own career, while I'm proud of my achievements and I've done pretty well, as in vice president of, 4 or 5 different companies, done well. I'm a, successful professor now. The truth is, I if I'm being truthful with myself, I did not reach my full potential.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the reasons I did not reach that potential is because I made excuses about myself.
Mm-hmm.
I said that I wasn't.
Right, you weren't good at.
I wasn't good at the financials. I wasn't
Mm-hmm.
smart enough in that area. I wasn't tough enough. The truth is, those were all just excuses for me to not continue and not, to do the things I needed to do to be successful.
Hello.
Hi.
All right, so then point 6, we had get yourself a coach, and you talked about your friend Jim, which I have written after that, but I think that that's a good way that we've added some personal stories throughout, which I like now, but that is a good sort of beginning transition from, it's less about, sort of less professional at this point, and that's just like a personal story.
Right.
That he's just,
right. If you're committed, you're going to hit roadblocks and
mm-hmm.
have someone in your life, people in your life who are going to be there to get. And then I would also tell the story that and people seem to really relate to that when I do it, because I'm laying myself out there and I tell them, look, I had, for someone who's spent their whole career in innovation and taking risks, I had a lot of difficult times with anxiety attacks and everything else.
And you're comfortable including that in
I am.
Okay.
And I do that especially. I played up because so many of my kids have that in school. And I want them to hear that from me, that I had problems, and I can't tell you how many times when I do that, they come to me I've had so many come to me and say, I tried to commit suicide and I did so, it's incredible.
Yeah,
they open
that's-
up and
that's
they said,
just
I
a
can't
really-
believe. So if you have these problems, then I can
fix it.
I can
Yeah,
do this.
you can
can't
still
I?
be
I can
successful, right.
I can still be successful.
That's definitely, I'm glad you're comfortable including that,
yeah.
because I think that's
So-
that's going to be a really strong point.
Right.
So yeah, that was good, because that was about your friend, and then it transitions a little bit. Number 7 was declare a second set. And that was another good story, because you said that when you first came into, was it Bob Evans? You said you came in, you weren't you weren't observing, but you were
Wasn't
trying to come up
observing
with immediate
everybody. I
changes.
just came in to try and make a whole bunch of changes. Just
Mm-hmm.
kind of, upset upset a lot of people. And then at the same time, that was when we had the vice president of the culinary who had passed, he passed away quickly, so that added to people's anxiety. And the team was not a strong functioning team.
Right.
Cohesive.
It was a weak team, and
But you transitioned them.
low morale. But we literally had this meeting. We talked about it. We changed the mindset.
Right.
On that day forward, we moved to a new mindset, and we're successful. So if you're really committed to something, when you have a roadblock, call a second set.
And that's a perfect story. I think that can stand alone. My second point is just change the mindset, move on to the next mindset.
Lucy, you might want to explain what a second set is, because not everyone plays tennis. So they might not understand that reference, but.
Right. And I usually start, I played college tennis, and, that's.
I
So.
dabbled with tennis, but, and I watch it, but so I know, but not everybody knows.
Right. Yeah, we'll put in a little blurb.
Usually when I say
blurb,
that,
yeah.
I could tell people in the audience who are like, I wish I could freaking do that with my wife or my husband or my, you know what I mean? It's like, I wish we could can we just have can we just freaking call a second set and stop talking about the same crap over and over again, right? Because it is, if you could think about it, if you could do like they do in a sport, wouldn't that be great? That's gone, that's behind you.
So we have that. I think that's going to be a really strong part of it. That's a good story, and that'll wrap that up really nicely. Number 8, point 8 for this was do a great job with things you don't like to do.
Right.
So
if you're committed to something, you can't just do the things you like. And that's where I tell the story about Matt the intern. I'll have to change his name again.
Yeah, so do you want to put that in there?
His father's my good friend,
So you want to include that story?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
That's
good story.
I thought that was a good story.
Yeah.
What did he say? He said, I'm not here to be a photographer.
Yeah. And I can't remember if he really said that, or I know he pissed me off. But I still would have hired him, but the other people did not want to hire him because he didn't show, enough commitment. He doesn't know that. Well, that's why he didn't get hired. He's doing well. He got a nice job. I just talked to his dad a couple of days ago. He's going to come visit me.
Yeah, so we don't have to include his name or anything, but that's definitely a good story.
You just say an intern.
Yeah, just an intern. That wraps it up.
Yeah.
So the 9th was you control your attitude.
Right.
And that was where you talked about your brother and his wife. Do you want that in there?
Oh, yeah.
Okay,
yeah,
because I thought that was a very strong example. So, and I think that story can stand alone. That's what I have under that point, but I think that's a strong enough story that's by itself. We'll wrap it up by saying, what you said, if he could control his attitude through that, you can control your attitude through losing a job, through not finding a job, things like that. Rejection at work. That's what I had. And then at the end, we had the idea of exercises at the end of the book.
You were going to check with Lori on some of those, right?
Yeah, I talked to her a little last night.
Collaborate like a kindergartner, stop multitasking and focus, prioritize and communicate. We had, because you told the story afterwards, so I wasn't exactly sure where we wanted it, but I had the additional story of the Delight Pizza.
Oh, if I wanted to put a couple of case examples.
Okay. So did you want that at the end? You didn't want that included earlier on?
No, I think I could. Well, let's get the shell down, and then let me figure out whether that should go in the end as a case study, or whether I could also use it in another area.
Right, I
if
think
it's
that
like
could
this
definitely
chapter
be-
needs some more work, it needs something else, then I'll throw that in.
That's true. If
You know?
we find ourselves light on something, that can fit in a lot of places.
Like when I've done this in more of a marketing sense, and I call it breakthrough marketing, and I've done it for like American Greetings Company, and I went up and I'm training them. In that case, I go up and I actually incorporate that whole story into the thinking different. Because I say think differently in all areas of the business. Here's an example. Boom. You know.
Okay, so I'll write down where you usually put that
So
because
it
that can
depends
work there.
on I know now my keynote. I don't have time for any of this, so I can't do any of this. Those things. And then, so I think there's a market out there for the keynote, which is what you traditionally do. But there's also this market for training. So we found some success in training. In Ohio University, they started an executive education thing. I'm still on their website. They just never went anywhere with the executive training. You know, so there may be something out there too where
Send me the link to that. We could maybe include that in your. We could certainly include that on your website, and then we can also market that too in your one sheet.
Yeah, but you don't want to. Okay, but you want to maybe take some of that, but then our university would want to get paid for it. So.
Well, if you want to take what they have and then tweak it so that we can use.
That's what I mean. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think that actually might be. You know, it's like, hey, instead of, you know, not just that I will like come in and do a keynote, but would you like some training from a professor to come in and talk to you about, you know, and that's what the book is about, managing change and so, you know.
Okay.
So think
Well,
about.
that would be good because when we have the book, then we could go to, here's the book, how about some training?
Right.
You know.
Now, and the great scenario is like the guy that when I got inspired to kind of do this, he came in and I saw him. It's like, his was probably, he hit the ultimate grand slam. You know, he had a book that probably nobody ever freaking read or anything. But China, China Yum was a dynasty in China. And he somehow met the leader in China who liked him and did something with him. Introduced him to David Novak, who was the CEO at Yum Brands. And David Novak hired him and paid him 7 figures to come in and train the whole organization.
Goodness.
Right? And because he wanted to change the whole culture. We had breakthrough results in rooms and all this other stuff, you know? And that was the grand slam. But there is, I think, out there and my brother's he hit on this once in his career where he was just a great presenter and everything, you know? And he was an economist, but he got General Motors. Guy was in his class, saw how good he was at presenting and how interesting. He said, "Do you ever do anything on total quality management, which was the thing back then?" And I was like, well, "Not really, but I can learn about it." And he literally went up for a thing and went from GM plant to GM plant training. You know, so this is the kind of thing that you get your organization fired up. You know.
Yeah. Oh, I know.
Oh, and I'm not caught on to one of those. But like at Papa Murphy's, I would go from franchisee meeting to franchisee meeting and fire them up with it. So, and I've seen, like when I went to the Speakers Bureau years ago, 5 or 6 years ago, when I was thinking about this, I remember this one lady, and her thing was, you find a niche, you know, like she found financial markets, hired a company who then hired her to go from place to place to charge them, do this training and kind of motivational firing up their people.
Well, what would be interesting would be to get a company that has several hubs or several different headquarters, and then send you across. And I actually have a contact through Dow Chemical, so maybe we start there.
Yeah.
With Matt. Then, you know.
But that's it. It's kind of like, you know, okay, so that would be the way. If you got something that said this would be interesting, and we can go from place to place and get people kind of fired up, and it'll be a cultural shift that we're trying
process?
I think, yeah, I think that, because that was,
I don't want it to be long.
yeah,
When do you go back to school?
25th.
20.
Yeah, just over 3.
That's same as us.
My brother moves in the summer. And he is going into marketing.
Oh my God! Well, we got to meet.
Yes.
It's unbelievable. If he's mature like you, he'll probably follow up. But I can't tell you how many times I meet someone and say, "Well, you tell your kid now you can come with me and we'll eat lunch full of so and so," and they just can't do it.
No, he's a good kid. I brought it up to him today.
So if you
actually,
want
and he was
me